What's going on, guys? Coming to you with yet another knife comparison, this time between the Sanrenmu Land Model 911. This is part of their 910 series of knives, basically their budget, poor man's large Sebenza line. And the Mingren Model 910 Plus, which, depending on who you ask, was either a knife made by Sanrenmu as a precursor to their 910 series, or was a knife that was falsely claiming to be a Sanrenmu made knife and was actually a bootleg or even counterfeit, depending on who you would ask. So, very interesting. They share the same overall design, similar sizes, similar materials, so I thought, why not compare the two of them? Quick disclaimer, this is still in production at the time of this video, but this is not, so if you for some reason want the Mingren or the Sanrenmu, just know this is going to be much easier to find than this, and let that play a factor in which one you may want to pick up for your hard-earned money, because that's what this video is about. It's about letting you know which one's the better knife for your money, and sometimes just showing two very similar knives next to each other. So we'll start with the blade on the Sanrenmu Land. We have a 3.4-inch blade made out of Sandvik 12C27 steel. Nice high flat grind, and that classic Sebenza style blade. Now this is very interesting in a number of ways because the blade grind, being a flat grind as opposed to a hollow grind, is a departure from the actual Sebenza blade. And they are featuring very nice high hollow grinds. That said, this very tall flat grind does an excellent job when slicing. Not saying a flat grind or a hollow ground blade wouldn't do a great job, but this thing cleaves, and it's kind of crazy. 12C27 can be very hit or miss. I've had some pretty good 12C27 blades, very few amazing 12C20 blades, and a few pretty terrible ones. This Land, however, sits in the excellent to amazing range. This thing has better edge retention than pretty much any 12C27 I've ever used before, sharpens up incredibly readily, and takes one hell of an edge. Now looking at the Mingren, we have a 3.5-inch blade, also marked as Sandvik 12C27. Maybe you can see that right there. This has a hollow grind, more traditional to a Sebenza style, and is that same overall beautiful Sebenza style drop point blade. In terms of slicing, this does, honestly, pretty well. It binds just slightly because of this weird thumb stud design. I'll get to that in deployment and lockup, but overall it performs just fine in terms of slicing. However, one downside to this is that it falls into the category of pretty mediocre 12C27. And there's always the chance that this isn't actually 12C27, given the potential bootleg nature of the knife and the company itself. But if it is 12C27, it is on the lowest end of edge holding capability. And if you don't know, a really well heat-treated steel, even of a lower grade, can perform well above its pay grade. Like Buck does some amazing things on their 420HC, which can cause it to perform at or above the AUS 8 level. And I know a lot of folks out there would say, well, what's the big deal with that? AUS 8 is not a great steel. Well, first of all, it's a perfectly adequate steel, but it's a far better steel on average than any 420 series steel. But because of Buck's amazing heat treat, they're able to bring that 420 to a level that it otherwise wouldn't reach. Well, 12C27 is kind of the same way. It really needs a good heat treat because on the low end, it'll perform like a 420 series steel. On the high end, it'll perform at or above the AUS 8 level. This one performs, on that closer to that 420 side. It doesn't hold a very good edge, even for light EDC cutting tasks. It does sharpen readily, though, and it does take a very nice edge. So is it really 12C27? I don't know. I can't test it. Maybe one day I'll send it off to be tested. But I'm not going to lie. Part of me has to wonder if that's actually a 3CR13 blade with false advertising, because it certainly doesn't perform to the level of any 12C27 I've used before, including, the other bad ones that I've used. So that's the point on the blade. Moving on to, actually one more thing I want to show. The Land has this rounded spine, much like a Sebenza would have, just kind of a premium, elegant touch. The Mingren has a flat spine. Okay, small touch, but it is a part of the blade. I wanted to mention it. Deployment and lockup, we have dual thumb studs here, very classic Sebenza step style, blue anodized. They give us excellent grip. I mean, we can really dig our thumb into that and get a great deployment every single time. And you can see this thing comes out lightning quick. I mean, this thing is fast. Lock up, tight. I have no play up and down. I have no play side to side. And I could easily adjust it at the pivot point if it ever developed any. It is a liner lock design. Here is your engagement. And there is our liner itself, nicely gemmed with a good cutout. Very easy to access and to use. The Mingren, here's your thumb studs on that. They are literally just metal cylinders. Okay, there's no knurling, there's no jimping. It is just a metal cylinder, or two metal cylinders. You can take them off, however, which is nice for consistent angle sharpeners, but does little for providing grip. When we do get our thumb on there, deployment speed is adequate, but also inconsistent. Sometimes it comes out nice, and other times it fails, just like that. So I usually will put just a little bit of wrist behind it to guarantee a deployment every single time. It's definitely not as smooth in the pivot point here. We're riding on Teflon washers as compared to a ball bearing system like the Sanrenmu, and that does lead to a slightly stiffer feeling. Now, I have nothing against washers. I think washers are a perfectly adequate way to help a knife deploy. But when compared against bearings, it can make a big difference, and this is one of those cases. Lock up and down, it's nice and tight. Side to side, it is nice and tight. And we have an adjustable pivot screw we can mess with if we ever needed to. Here's our liner lock engagement. And it is also jimped nicely with a good cutout. Now I'll say this, I prefer the Sanrenmu's cutout and jimping method all day, every day, because it's done from the side, which means when we come in from the side to disengage it, that's where we're grabbing. Disengaging the liner here, you know, it's obviously on the top, so when we push from the side, it's not quite as effective. We kind of had to push from the top over, which is just a little bit less comfortable on our thumb. Not a big deal, but it is a point in the Sanrenmu's favor. It is an advantage that it has. Centering on the blades, here's the Mingren. It is not great. You can see it lists very heavily to that left-hand side, possibly even rubbing on that liner. The Sanrenmu, here's our centering here. Not perfect, slight list to the right-hand side, but at least it's not touching that stainless steel liner in any way. They are both a flow-through pillar construction. Here you can see the Sanrenmu. And here we can see the Mingren. We can also see the skeletonizing. There's the skeletonizing on those stainless steel liners in the Mingren, only on one side. Here we have it on the Sanrenmu, much larger holes. And they are also only on one side, unless you count that one hole as a lightning hole. Weights on these knives, the Sanrenmu is 4.7 ounces, and so is the Mingren. They are actually identical in weight, which is very interesting considering that this has a smaller handle and blade than this. Okay, we're looking at a 4.5-inch G10 handle here, 4 3/4-inch G10 handle here. Now that said, the texturing is interesting because the Sanrenmu being on the bottom, we can see it has a broader texture pattern, whereas the Mingren is the more traditional fine pattern. That said, however, the 910, the black version of the 911, uses the exact same texture pattern as this. So, not really too much to talk about there. Just wanted to mention it. In terms of ergonomics, the Sanrenmu melts into the hand. I mean, those corners are rounded nicely so that it doesn't bite in. We don't notice the clip in our hand because it's nice and set in the center, and it doesn't have too much clearance off the side of the scale. This melts in the hand. Great jimping top side to provide excellent traction. This is a very ergonomic knife. The Mingren fits in the hand pretty well. I'm not going to lie, this does feel ergonomic and comfortable. Maybe a slight dig from that gemmed liner lock that's running a bit proud there, but honestly, not too much. It does feel good. It is more blocky in the hand, however. These edges, these corners, if I can get my camera to focus. There you go. Those corners are just not nearly as well rounded. So it does feel a little more blocky in the hand, but it still feels good. Jimping top spine is worthless. It doesn't do anything. And the same for the jimping on the liners themselves. Just not a good grip from that jimping. Price points, or actually, sorry, pocket clips, before I get too far ahead of myself. On the Sanrenmu, it is left and right hand reversible. And it's a traditional Sebenza style clip. It is countersunk into the G10 handle, which does help considering it is just a single screw. I have still had countersunk clips in handles loosen when they were just one screw, and I could never get them tight again. This one, however, has been great. It hasn't loosened at all. Tension on this clip is outstanding. I mean, that is a super... I can barely lift that clip. Super tight clip. We can see that little bit of a recurve there to give more of a grab on the pants. Good amount of clearing without being too much, and it doesn't flare up too much torque to the tip. On the Mingren, it is also left and right hand side reversible for tip-up carry only. More of a traditional, almost Benchmade style clip. Here is the clearance from the handle there. You can see a little more clearance there, but still not obnoxious. And the flare-up is not bad. Tension, nice and strong. Not as stout as this, but perfectly adequate. How do they ride in pocket? Well, let's go ahead and find out. Throw the Sanrenmu on this one, on this side. And the Mingren on this side. So we can see here's how they carry next to each other. Honestly, they carry pretty much the same depth, maybe slightly lower on the Sanrenmu, but honestly not by much. And because this has a lanyard on it, might as well talk about it. Lanyard hole on this, very obviously big enough to accommodate 550 cord. No standoff pillar for it on the Sanrenmu. Still big enough to accommodate 550 cord, and it's a beautiful blue anodized standoff pillar, which is just a nice touch that the Mingren doesn't have. Overall fit and finish and quality, this is better in every single conceivable way. This feels better. The edges are more rounded. The skeletonization is better. The finish on the blade is better. The method in the pivot system is better. The Mingren is inferior in practically every way, if I'm being honest. I don't usually say which knife is better in a comparison, but I'm going to be blunt. This is a better knife all day long than this, as far as I'm concerned. Price tag on this is hard to beat. Sub $30 for the Sanrenmu Land model 910, 911, or 9103, or whichever version you go for. The Mingren is discontinued and is honestly quite hard to find, and when you do find them, sometimes very expensive. I mean, we're talking... I've seen these things sold for like $80, which for this is just not worth it. I paid, I think, $40 to get this one purely for the collection. Maybe it was a little more, maybe it was a little less. Would I pay that price again? No. it wasn't worth the price the first time, if I'm being honest. It's just not a very good knife. But I wanted it for the collection and for comparison's sake, and there you can see it. So whenever it was on the market, this sold for about $20, $25. Account for inflation, it wouldn't be too far away from this. So that has been my comparison on the Sanrenmu model 911 and the Mingren model 910 Plus. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, peace, and I will see you later.